Today, I want to talk about all of my theories for what I believe would have happened in Season 3 and Dimension 3 of the Netflix series The OA. Some of this will be familiar to those who have seen my previous video, but today's will introduce some new information that will help pave the road for my next video, discussing how Season 5 would have gone, and how it would reveal the true nature of Prairie Story from back in Season 1. Season 1 focused on Prairie telling her story to the Crestwood Five before jumping to Dimension 2, where she lived a luxurious life in San Francisco after enjoying a childhood with her father in Russia. This season ended with the OA jumping to a third dimension, where the OA is just a Netflix original series, just like in real life. Throughout Season 2, it had been foreshadowed that Hap would lead OA to a place where everyone calls her the OA, as they know her from the Netflix series, but where she thinks of the OA as just a story she made up, so she doesn't call herself that. In this dimension, she is known as Britt Marling, the name of the real-life actress who plays the OA and who co-created the show with Zal Batmanglish. This fictionalized version of Britt Marling is not an exact replica of the real-life one that we know, but she shares none of the history of the character of Prairie or Nina. Likewise, the other actors on the show would be playing fictionalized versions of themselves in Dimension 3 who don't share the same history of their Dimension 1 or 2 counterparts. In this dimension, the OA has amnesia, similar to how Homer was suppressed by Dr. Roberts' host consciousness in Season 2. However, in Dimension 3, there is an extra layer to the confusion that OA is experiencing. As Britt Marling, she was the creator of OA, so even with the OA having some control of her consciousness in the body, OA herself would think she is crazy for thinking that she is the OA, and that she is really just Britt Marling. To say otherwise would get her called crazy, and after such a traumatic head injury, she would be thinking the same. All through Season 3, OA as Britt Marling will be fighting the suspicion that she really is the OA, but trying to convince herself that she is just Britt Marling. Helping this even further would be Hap, who jumped into the body of his actor Jason Isaacs. He knows full well who he is and who OA is, but will push the narrative that she is crazy if she thinks she is really the OA. In Dimension 3, there is no Zal, and instead, Jason Isaacs fills in the role as co-creator. While Zal and Britt are just friends in real life, in this dimension, Britt and Jason Isaacs are husband and wife, as well as co-creators on the show. Their marriage mirrors that of the medium and the engineer discussed in Season 2, with Britt being the creative force and Jason Isaacs turning it into a structure suitable for television streaming. With the show doing an entire season about the creators making the show, the season would become the most meta season of them all. Jason and Britt probably worked in harmony up to this point, but as Hap and OA, they would be fighting for creative control over what actually happened. Hap, always trying to paint himself as not the bad guy, would push for a story that glamorized Hap, the way villainous characters like Dexter have been glamorized in real life, villains being treated as aspirational in some twisted way. It would become not just commentary on the show, but commentary on the control of media as a whole in our society. The show thus far has been about Hap exploiting those who are naturally connected to something more spiritual in order to not just understand it, but to claim the glory for its discovery. In Dimension 3, this would be echoed through how the entire entertainment industry focuses more on profits than using their resources to create a more positive world. How the propaganda machine glamorizes shallow lifestyles because it makes for good entertainment, with culture corrupting as these cynical stories make their profits. It would be about men like Hap presenting themselves as the best for being the ones to achieve greatness and overall good, but all the while doing evil actions to exploit others in order to achieve it. Causing controversy all season would be Steve, and perhaps Homer, who would spend the entire time trying to convince OA of who she really is if they both made it to Dimension 3. Hap would have great control over Britt as his wife, however, particularly after her injury. If they had a great relationship up to this point, she would trust him even when he seems to be acting more like Hap than Jason Isaacs, thinking that Jason Isaacs is just being extra firm in order to make sure that Britt Marling is being taken care of. At about halfway through this season, however, I believe OA would wake up to who she really is and continue on her mission to save the others. At the halfway point of the first 2 seasons, near the end of each of their 4th episodes, a character has an NDE that gives them a glimpse of a coming season. Homer's NDE in Season 1 gave us a glimpse of Season 2. This scene ended up taking place in Episode 2 of Season 2, about a quarter of the way through the season, or halfway to the halfway point of the season. At the actual halfway point of Season 2, the OA has her own NDE, and she is sent to Dimension 3. Here, she is killed by Old Night and sent to what he describes as the moment that she will see her true face and reawaken to her mission, but what he means here is rather symbolic. When Homer was sent to Dimension 2 during his NDE, he took over the body of somebody else. As we saw in Season 2 that Homer, or Dr. Roberts if you will, was in a therapy session with OA at the time that Homer was seemingly running around Treasure Island from his NDE. OA, likewise, appears to have crawled out of a tunnel in her NDE and into the body of someone who was in a bathroom. She then proceeds to make their way across a plane to what looks like Dimension 3's Britt Marling with her short hair. This waking up moment is very layered. When this moment does finally happen, OA will be in Britt Marling's body, turning to see what is presumably a complete stranger behind her on this plane. Up until now, OA had believed herself to be just Britt Marling, with the story of OA being fiction. While this moment is mundane to the outside viewer, OA would recognize it as something she wrote about in Season 2 of her show that she had brought to life. That is when Britt would realize that she is in fact the OA and that she has the power to turn her thoughts, her beliefs, and her fantasies into reality. I imagine this person walking up to Britt to be a random stranger who doesn't quite remember how they got to this spot once OA's consciousness from Dimension 2 leaves their body, but upon recognizing Britt's face as the actress from the OA, would probably ask, "I'm sorry, aren't you the OA?" This is something Britt would likely get asked a lot of in the show, and particularly after her fall, Britt would make a point to politely explain, "I am Britt Marling, the creator of the OA series on Netflix," using it as a way to introduce her supposedly real name. This would be the first time, however, that she would instead say yes, she is the OA. The halfway point of the previous 2 seasons was a glimpse of the seasons to come, but for Season 3, it instead makes sense that this moment will come true at precisely the halfway point of the season. Each season is supposed to repeat the same basic story, but in addition to that, I believe the series as a whole to be a loop and a palindrome. There is even evidence for this in the title of the show. The O, of course, represents the never-ending loop that the OA seems to be caught in, and the A, I theorize, represents how the second half of the story will mirror the first half. In addition to this, the rendering of the A in the official logo renders it without the dash that connects the 2 sides of the A. The point where the 2 lines generally meet is broken as well. I believe this to be foreshadowing that the halfway point in the series will be a sort of breaking open point. The point not just where OA's memories return in full, but where she understands what she really is. Because once Britt Marling realizes that she is the OA, she will have to accept that she made the OA up, and somehow brought her into reality. The first 2 dimensions were believed to be natural splits from the same timeline, perhaps one of infinite splits among timelines where the same people end up having different outcomes. But Dimension 3 takes place in a world completely removed from that timeline, with the same people still existing. Dimensions 1 and 2 from up here in Dimension 3 would look like fake little creations of Britt Marling brought to life, something foreshadowed in Season 2. When Kareem was investigating the dream study, he ended up meeting Dr. Marlo Rhodes. She quit the study because she believed that when reality crossed into fantasy, that was natural, but when fantasy, such as dreams, somehow crossed into reality, that was something to be afraid of. The entire show up to this point had been about trying to convince people to believe in something powerful, and to somehow make it real through their power of belief, such as with the 5 movements. By making the characters believe within the show, and then making the audience believe by watching the show, Britt Marling in Dimension 3 accidentally made the OA real, and accidentally gave her the ability specifically to jump into her body, as the OA is a shadow of Britt Marling herself. And it is this creative power that, while tragically making the OA story fake in a sense, also makes the true version of the OA an infinitely powerful being, able to bring anything to life through the power of belief, not just through her own belief, but the belief of others as cultivated through her story. But with the OA, Britt also brought Hap into existence and into Dimension 3 as well, and who knows what evil could be done because of him and the knowledge he has. Thus, the only way to stop Hap from destroying perhaps many multiverses of realities with propagandized storytelling glamorizing his ideologies, the OA would have to force Hap back down into a fictional dimension, to a place where she believes that they will all be safe from him. Further evidence supporting the chain of events comes from the big inspiration to the series, the works of Madame Blavatsky, specifically her 2-part series, The Secret Doctrine. This famous psychic and theosophist from the 1800s claims to have seen a secret ancient Tibetan document that all future religions and myths would be inspired by, with this document being the purest version of the real story of how God created the universe and where man came from. The books cross-analyze this supposed document with all the real-world myths, and Blavatsky would then interpret the shared meanings of the stories to explain her idea of how the universe is created and the history of man. The secret doctrines were mostly believed to be fake, with Blavatsky admitting in her work that she wants to mislead you to some degree. The conclusion the average person comes to is that the document is fake, but Blavatsky wrote it to justify her personal and perhaps psychic interpretation of all the world's religions and mythologies, from Jewish Kabbalah to Native American myths. The OA as a whole feels structured very similar to the Secret Doctrines books, with Britt Marling reconciling popular science theories of today with the older religious and mythological ideas of the world. In this Secret Doctrine, Madame Blavatsky describes 7 days of creation, such as seen in the Bible's opening chapter and other mythological texts. These days represent eras of creation, with Blavatsky claiming we are only in the 4th era of creation now, the middle of 7 eras. The middle of this era Blavatsky describes as a point where humans burst out of their egg, recognize themselves as spiritual beings, and start walking back towards where they first started, mirroring how OA will seemingly start to descend back down to lower dimensions after realizing her true power at the breaking point in the middle of the series in Dimension 3. And with us now having an understanding on where Season 3 might have gone, our next video will tackle Season 5 of the show, how it would have ended, and the true nature of Prairie's story from Season 1. Season 4 is unfortunately the season we know the least about, and while I will explain its structure in my next video about how the OA would have ended as a whole, there will be a dedicated video for Season 4 possibilities that will follow. Please subscribe so you don't miss either of these or any of the other theory and analysis videos that I have planned after, and a special thanks to everyone who was able to help me with this, from all the regular users on Reddit to the ones that deleted their accounts and just left some mysterious pieces of information for all of us to decode. See you guys next time.